This is Push Me to Talk, Field Notes. I'm Arvin, and this episode is a short editorial coming out of our very first net of the year. Not a recap, not a product pitch, but a signal check. Because what came up on this net wasn't really about a device. It was about what still works when everything else politely stops working. Our net on January 7th focused on a small piece of gear that carries an outsized implication, a satellite communicator that pairs to your phone. On paper, it's simple. Two-way text, location sharing, SOS. But what made this net different wasn't the spec sheet. It was who was talking about it and how they framed it. This wasn't influencer energy. This was longtime radio operators, off-grid users, first responders, and satellite veterans quietly circling the same idea. Redundancy still matters, especially when convenience convinces people that it doesn't. Phones are incredible, until they aren't. We're entering a moment where satellite access is now being marketed as resilience. And that's fine until the screen breaks or the battery dies or the interface assumes time, dexterity, or calm you don't have. What came through clearly on this net was this. Dedicated devices survive chaos better than multi-purpose ones. Not because it's perfect, but because of three quiet advantages. It doesn't rely on local infrastructure, it still works if your phone doesn't, and it's inexpensive enough that redundancy becomes realistic. Operators weren't describing theory. They were describing tests, delays measured, messages confirmed, devices actually carried, not lusted over. And the same question surfaced again later in the month from a very different direction. What happens when the phone still powers on, but the answers don't? When search, maps, and reference material simply aren't there to lean on. One signal this month didn't come from the main Wednesday net at all. During a Friday weather net, the conversation drifted into food acquisition, specifically the use of air arms, and not in the way people usually frame it. It wasn't about tactics or fantasy scenarios. It was about practice, sustainability, and realism. And here's the thing. Weather quietly constrains everything, ranging from noise discipline, storage conditions, movement, and even how often you can train. And under those conditions, low-cost, low-noise tools that allow frequent practice start to matter more than high-output gear you rarely touch. That's a pattern worth paying attention to. And this ties directly back to what we keep circling as a group, optimizing for failure modes, not features. When weather limits mobility or visibility, when conditions aren't ideal, the question isn't what looks impressive on paper, it's what you can actually use repeatedly without drawing attention or burning resources. Weather doesn't just threaten infrastructure. It reshapes what practical preparedness even looks like. Another pattern surfaced across multiple channels this month, and it's subtle unless you're looking for it. Whether the discussion was weather-driven medical prep, offline information tools, or mesh-style comms experimentation, the same truth kept showing up. Systems degrade faster than knowledge. Connectivity assumptions fail. Power becomes intermittent. Response times stretch. Under those conditions, retained skill and accessible information outlast devices optimized for perfect conditions. Think about that. What stood out wasn't any single tool or solution. It was the convergence. Weather predicts injury types. Air quality affects health decisions. Offline knowledge becomes more valuable when search engines disappear. None of this lives in isolation. None of it depends on ideal conditions. Now, taken together, these signals reinforce the trajectory we're watching. Preparedness that survives stress looks quieter, more redundant, and far less dependent on uninterrupted systems than most people expect. One of the strongest moments on the net had nothing to do with hardware. Nobody asked, "Is this the best?" They asked, "What happens if it sits untouched for a year? Can it be activated only when needed? Does it still work when things go sideways, not just inconvenient?" That tells you everything about this community. We're not optimizing for features, we're optimizing for failure modes. This episode of Field Notes isn't the conclusion, it's a marker. On an upcoming Wednesday Net, we'll be taking a practical, level-headed look at martial law and how we think about it from a prepper's mindset. Nothing sensational, just a calm, grounded discussion. Because later this month, we'll step back and ask the harder question. What actually carried signal, and what just made noise? That's what Last Voice is for. If you were on the net, you already know. The conversation doesn't end when the channel goes quiet. If you weren't, you can listen in and follow along through the Doomsday Radio Preppers Facebook group and the DRP Zello channel, where these conversations happen live. And if you're testing systems in the real world, bring the failures back to the group. What broke, what surprised you, and what still worked when it mattered. This is Push Me to Talk. Field Notes. Stay steady. We'll catch you on the net.